We have Aaron Carlisle on the episode today for Beyond Jaws. It's going to be a fun one. We're going to be talking about sharks and hurricanes. Yes, that's all I have to say. Sharks and hurricanes. We're going to talk about that on today's episode of the We're going to talk about that on today's episode of the Beyond Jaws podcast. Let's start the show. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another exciting episode of the Beyond Jaws podcast. I'm your co-host, Andrew Lewin, here with my other co-host, Dr. David Ebert. Dave, are you ready to talk about sharks and hurricanes?
Oh, absolutely. And especially today because Aaron Carlisle was a former student at Moss Landing Marine Laboratories when we had the Pacific Shark Research Center funded about 20 years ago. And
Love it.
So I've known Aaron a long time, and I've got to say I'm looking forward to this one here with the Sharknado angle is definitely will come into play during this discussion today.
Yeah, for sure. You know, being at the University of Delaware, it talks about, how he got there, the different schools that he went to, the challenges that he faced, doing his master's, doing his PhD. There's a lot to go into here. What do you think people should really listen to for this interview?
I think some of the stuff we talked about, we talked a bit about, as you go, if you're pursuing a degree in marine science, thinking about each step of the way you go. As we comment on the master's degrees, certainly you can't go wrong with that. But if you're thinking about a PhD, we have some advice for you. What you really need to think about if you're entertaining pursuing a PhD, which a lot of people today are. But you got to decide. And anyway, we have some really good comments. We talk about that.
Yeah.
And I really think that's important for young people if you're listening, especially if you're in that field now and you're thinking about it. Listen to what we have to say because I think it'd be really helpful for you.
Absolutely. So let's get into the interview with Dr. Aaron Carlisle from the University of Delaware. Here's the interview, and we'll talk to you after. Hey, Aaron, welcome to the Beyond Jaws podcast. Are you ready to talk about sharks and hurricanes?
Oh, boy, am I ever.
Well, welcome to the Beyond Jaws podcast, where we have an awesome special guest today. Have you seen the tagline, Sharks and Hurricanes, on social media recently and wondered what the heck that was about? Well, today, our guest is going to tell you about that, about a real-life Sharknado. Our guest is Dr. Aaron Carlisle, and Aaron is an assistant professor of fisheries ecology at the University of Delaware. His research focuses on how abiotic and biotic environmental and organismal biology interface to influence behavior, distribution, and ecology of species, and how these interactions impact their population dynamics, life history strategies, and ecosystem. He uses a variety of approaches and technologies such as stable isotope analysis, biologging, combined with new ways to provide unique insights into marine species. Aaron's a member of the IUCN Shark Specialist Group and is an active member of the American Elasmobranch Society and the American Fisheries Society. He has over 70 peer-reviewed publications. As I mentioned, he's an assistant professor of fisheries ecology at the University of Delaware. Aaron did his bachelor's degree at Princeton University, and he did his master's at the Cadillac of places, the Moss Landing Marine Laboratories, which is where I'm based at. And in fact, I've known Aaron for 20-something years long time. And then he went on and did his PhD at Stanford University. With that, Aaron, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Always happy to talk about anything sharky.
Cool.
Very nice.
Cool. Well, so start off with our first question. We always wanted to find out, people like, how did you get interested in sharks and marine science in general?
So, I mean, it'll surprise you, but think about my age. I was born, I hate to say it, in 1977. So what do you think led to my interest in sharks?
Sharknado? Sharknado. It was Sharknado, right?
Star Wars? Was it Star Wars? Star Wars came out.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah. It was Jaws. It was Jaws. So my father was I grew up in the Puget Sound up in Washington.
Very nice.
And on an island, and my dad was a family practice doctor, and he was working the emergency room overnight. And I was 2 or 3, and he came home very tired. My mom went out to do something and left me with him. I have an older brother who was in this side doing something, and a younger sister too. But at the point when she came back, Jaws was on TV. My dad was asleep on the couch, and I was sitting on his lap watching Jaws, and my eyes were like dinner plates, huge. And my dad was just snoring, and she was like, "What did you do?" And nothing. And so I was traumatized in a terrible, terrible way. Jaws was everywhere in every body of water: the toilet, the bathtub, the sink. And when you live on an island, you have to take a ferry to get to the mainland. And so Jaws was just chomping at the bit to get us and sink the ferry whenever we go back to go to the mainland. And so I was literally terrified of sharks for a very long time. And that just morphed into fascination. I was like morbidly fascinated. And then I started reading about them. I started learning about them, just reading every book, everything I could find about them. And that turned into interest over time. And I would have never in 1,000 years thought that I would be where I am studying sharks as like a job now. But it started back then, thanks to Jaws. Again, Jaws' 50th anniversary.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, a lot of people, I think, got their inspiration for that and from that. And yeah, so here I am.
So at what point were you like in grade school or high school when you decided like you wanted to do sharks? Or
I never actually. So my uncle is a marine biologist at Scripps. And
cool.
He was a well-known ecologist, did a lot of Antarctic research, kelp forest ecology. His name's Paul Dayton, for anyone who knows the guy. And so I didn't know who he was. Like, he was kind of a bigwig in the marine ecology world. And I didn't know that at all. He was my uncle, and I was always very excited about the ocean, and he would tell me stories, and that was a big part of it. Also, being on an island, you can't get away from the ocean.
Right.
But I would tell him about sharks, and he told me, Aaron, you shouldn't waste your time studying sharks. You should study something important like crabs.
Like a true invertebrate zoologist.
Yeah, exactly. And he has since apologized many, many times and said, you were right, I was wrong. But, you know, it was kind of this combination of Jaws with my uncle being a marine biologist, hearing, because he was one of the first generation of, like, divers. He built his own scuba gear back in, like, the 50s. And the stories he told me just inspired me. And it just kind of was a virus that got into me, and I couldn't get rid of it. And then being on an island, you can't get away from the ocean.
Yeah.
It was part of me, and now I'm just lucky enough to keep turning this into a job and career and play around amazing with the ocean. It's wonderful.
I have a story. I have a quick story. My supervisor for my master's, when he was my undergraduate teacher at University of Guelph, he talked about how he was a plankton biologist, was his background. And I remember he asked us when we first started the class, he said, who here wants to study whales? Who here wants to study sharks? And people put up whales, and he's like, they're useless. They're absolutely useless. Plankton is where you have to go. And I think people were so angry at him at the end of the class because he just kept mentioning that because he was a plankton biologist. So of course he's going to think that. But it was very interesting.
And that's similar. Like, to me, like when I've always been interested in sharks, but then when I actually when I was an undergrad, I ended up taking a summer class, subtitle Ecology, at Hopkins Marine Station at Stanford University, which is where I ended up doing my PhD and postdoc. And it was an amazing, beautiful experience. We were diving. It was subtitle Ecology. We were diving every day, learning kelp forest ecology, all the invertebrates, all the fish, all the plants, all the algae. It was amazing. And that's what led me to kind of apply to grad school. I was like, I really like this.
Yeah.
And my uncle actually told me, if you want to study fish, you should go to Moss Landing Marine Labs, because there's a guy there, Greg Kaye, who's like one of the best, only old school ichthyologists that'll teach you everything about fish.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, so let's do that.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what led me down this path that led me to Moss Landing. Was just my uncle telling me you should do this, and I ended up doing it. But it was just kind of this confluence of events that led to this. And because once I got into Greg's lab, he was very not anti-shark, but anti-flashy things and things like that. And I was like, I don't want to do sharks because, that's not what a serious marine biologist does. They study things like plankton and crabs. Everyone knows that. And so, then I ended up just falling into this leopard shark kind of idea, and it was largely through Dave Ebert, like your wonderful host, had a big part of that, and along with our other grad students at the time, Joe Bizzaro and Wade Smith, who were like, hey, you should do something like this. And then the guy who's actually my co-advisor was Rick Starr, who worked for California Sea Grant. He had the telemetry expertise that he he taught me everything I know about that stuff. And so as I'm sure everyone probably would tell you, we are all products of everyone we interact with through our past. And the only reason any of us get anywhere is through our network of people that get us there.
Yeah.
And so it's funny because you're talking about plankton, crabs, whatever. It's like there's the people who are like, this is what's important. So I really avoided sharks for as long as I could, just because I didn't want to be one of those people. I didn't want to be a whale hugger. I didn't want to be a shark hugger. But I couldn't avoid it. It just happened.
I was going to say, you can imagine, because Greg Kaye was also my advisor when I did my master's back in the early 80s. And you can imagine, Aaron, what it was like going to Greg back in the early 80s, right after Jaws had come out. You know, Mr. Anti-Flash, but actually, he started doing the shark stuff at that time, but he did it from more of an ecology standpoint. Like, the sharks were just like another fish, something to do with. It wasn't like there was anything flashy, and it was and even when you started there in the early 2000s, it was very different than it even is today. I think in terms of, wouldn't you agree with the shark in the terms of shark?
Oh, 100%, very different.
You know,
everything has changed.
It wasn't. So here's a question for you, because you and Andrew are kind of in that middle group from my age group to the younger kids that are like in school now. You're kind of in that middle group, but do you think like the social media stuff has changed a lot of that landscape?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, it's yeah. I mean, it's changed everything. It's not just shark science. It's society and culture and civilization.
Yeah.
Honestly, I mean, it's probably the biggest change in my
our
lifetime.
culture for sure.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
So it was like when you said you're doing sharks, it's like, okay, it's like, wasn't like such a, even when you were back there at Mossland, it wasn't like today where it seemed like there's more of a like, oh wow, sharks kind of thing, where it was a fish we're studying.
Well, yeah, and back then, to be a quote unquote shark person, you had to go through school, you had to publish all these papers, you had to be one of like 2 or 3 people that's asked to be on like National Geographic or BBC. This is before Shark Week almost, not really, but around that time. And now you can just jump in the water with a shark, take some pictures, and become a shark expert.
Yeah.
And it's about social media, it's about the exposure, and it's not about actual expertise or training or knowledge. It's about your likes and that's my own, I'm being
no, you're right.
But
it's true. I mean, people look at it, and if you have a lot of followers, it's almost like you have a PhD.
Yep.
Where this person has so many followers, so this person can do so much with it. Whether that's right, like whether they do or not is irrelevant, as people are like, oh, people really like this person because you have like 1 million followers, 2 million followers, 10,000 followers. But if you have if you're an actual PhD and you're not on social media all that much, but you share, some of your stuff online, it's more scientific based, but you only have like 200 followers, people are like, wow, you don't have a lot of influence. It's like, it's very different. It definitely changes the way the public sees you as an expert, quote unquote expert. Cause as you said, Aaron, like, somebody jumps into, I mean, well, if anybody has seen, which I don't recommend, the Dancing with Sharks show that they had this year for Sharks Week, which was absolutely atrocious. Like they were calling them shark experts and shark wranglers and all this kind of stuff. And you're just like, what are we doing here, folks? Like, what is this,
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And like, I mean, it's that Shark Week, everything. It's like when I've been watching some of the this year's Shark Week episodes. I've tried to watch some just to kind of keep my feel on the pulse. Yeah. And it's so hard. It's so hard to make it through any of them. And, and you see these people, and my daughter will say, Leah will say, who's this person? I'm like, yeah. And they're like, do they know what they're doing? Like, no, they're a videographer, and that they've just done it long enough where they've kind of taken on this persona of being a shark expert or marine biologist or whatever.
Like there's always 1 or 2 of those episodes in that week where you're like, oh, this is interesting. Like they've taken actual scientific study and they've kind of visualized it, which is kind of cool. Sharkfest, I find, does more of that these days, where they actually take like a scientific. Lauren Meyer was on it with I won't forget the name, but yeah, Charlie,
yeah.
yeah. And they use some cool ones, but yeah, I think it's really interesting the way it's gone these days.
Yeah, and when I if I come across as bad mouthing and poo pooing that stuff, I don't mean to do that. I mean, everyone tries to find their niche and make a living, and that's fine. And so it's no ill will to anyone doing any of that.
No,
it's something where I'm like I still have imposter syndrome for what I do, and so I'm like, it took me a while. When can I say I'm actually a marine biologist? I asked my wife Erin, like, when can I say I'm a marine biologist? And I don't. I still sometimes I'm like, I can't believe that I'm actually considered to be an expert in anything.
Right, it's still surreal. Yeah.
What you say is it's really true, because like nowadays anybody, if they just get on, have a social media account, YouTube, they're an expert on it. But I know just for myself, like I'd done a PhD, a postdoc, I'd written a book, published like 24 papers. I still didn't consider myself like any kind of an expert. It wasn't until like some of my mentors, like Greg Kaye and some of those guys, said, "It's okay, Dave, you can like acknowledge like you know something about sharks at this point in time," that I actually like, okay, I guess I know something. But I had to get that sort of peer review, literally like a peer review before to acknowledge it. I just didn't feel comfortable saying it. And whereas today, I think it's just a very different landscape.
Different world, very different thresholds, and the bars are different, up or down or whatever.
For sure. And with that said, there are some great scientists who are on social media who are sharing actual science,
100%.
Which is great. I love to see that type of science. They are, either becoming experts as they're doing their PhD or they're doing their grad work, and they're sharing that experience and so forth. And you have some really great communicators out there who have become great communicators as they do more of this kind of stuff. And I think it'll benefit. It'll be an interesting thing to see this new generation that have grown up with social media from birth, and to see how that reacts. I'll never forget my daughter, who's now 16, and walking up to the TV when she was just like a year and a bit, with in diapers and her little stuffy, and she's trying to swipe the TV open, like instead of using the monitor.
I know.
That's how it's changed, and it's crazy to think like she thought that was a huge iPad or tablet. Which today it could be. You never know, right? But I mean that's how it's changed. It's going to be interesting to see how things are shared, compared to like the way science is shared now, which is over. Or how it was like still now, but even before was peer-reviewed papers. But we realize those don't get shared with the general public. So unless someone's out there doing a talk to the public, or do a talk at an aquarium or at a zoo or in a university lecture hall, that information wasn't getting out to people, including like managers who needed the information to make better decisions. So I think social media definitely adds to that aspect. I think it's going to be interesting to see how that gets shared.
Another question, Aaron, for you, because do you have PhD students that you're? Okay, I thought you so, because now even back when you were going through, and I definitely when I was finishing like a master's, going to a master's was like when I was going through was a big deal. And if you're going to do a PhD, you really had to give it a lot of thought, and like your advisors, like Greg Kaye, like I'm sure with you, and I remember even talking to you a bit. Is like you gave us some thought, like is this really? Is it worth doing the PhD for what I want to go in my career? If you're going to become like a professor like you are, clearly you need to do a PhD. But in a lot of positions you don't need that. But today it seems like everybody wants to do that PhD so they can say that they're doctor whoever. And I try to tell people, like, and you probably do as well, like think about if this is really where you want to go, because you can almost be overly qualified.
100% correct. Every single potential student I talk to, I bring this up, and I tell them like, PhD is, if you want to get it for just to have it by your, the PhD by your name, great, but don't do it for employment or job, and if you can afford to do it, but it's only useful for certain situations, and sometimes it hurts. Masters never hurt.
Right.
Masters only help. It never is a bad thing. But once you get a PhD, you are pigeonholed, you're overqualified, even for things you would love to do. And you won't get hired because they're going to assume you're not going to be happy being at a not running the show. Because if you have a PhD, you're gonna want to run the show. That's the whole idea, is that you only do it if you want to manage something, run something, have a program that does X, Y, Z. And so it's not useful for many people. And so it's hard to kind of disabuse young students that, like, I want to get a PhD, and you ask them why, and they're like, well, I just always wanted to. And like, great, if you really want to and you want to take the time to do it without having any potential employment on the other side, just given the reality of being in marine science and opportunities to get jobs and careers, it's not going to be necessarily worth it. You need to think about it.
Yeah, and something you and I were talking about before we came on air here was that really, and I can speak from being in college in the late 70s and early 80s, there's never been a lot of jobs in this field. The only blip was in the 60s when the U.S. and the Soviets were in this sort of science space race. Really, it was a space race. They put a lot of money in both space and into the oceans. But except for in the 1960s there, it's never been a field people would go into because there just was not many jobs. You have a few, but not many. And so people today, young people, they say, well, they're worried about jobs. Well, it's never been a field there's a lot of jobs involved in it. And so people, young people listening, think about, you should think about that. And I think what you said too is a master's, you can't go wrong. You'll learn skills that will be very helpful to you, but PhD, you got to really think, especially with the student debt now coming out of those things. It's, I mean, who wants to run up I don't know what it costs to go for a PhD at University of Delaware, but I'm probably guessing it's a couple $100,000 to do a PhD at least.
I don't actually even know, but I mean, the whole point of the PhD is hopefully you aren't paying for it. So
you can get that paid for. Yeah,
that's true.
But I mean, there's living expenses and everything like that. It can be. It's a significant investment.
It's time. It's a huge
time.
investment. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I mean, it takes most of you, right into your basically early 30s if you're doing you're going for the PhD. It's not something you're going to be done with. I mean, if you're very, very good, you might finish by your late 20s, but more likely it's going to be somewhere in your early 30s or later before you actually finish.
Even later for me when I went to Moss Landing and had the typical Moss Landing 5-year masters or whatever.
If anybody's listening, the problem with Moss Landing is they got the 5-year master's program. Some people could be 7 or 8 even. Talk to Wade Smith and Joe Bizarro if you want.
And they actually, the Cal State instituted a limit on the master's, the length of time you could be a master's student. Because there was a guy, I don't know if you probably knew him, Dave Ventresca. And they instituted a limit at 14 years because of how long he took to graduate.
14 years, wow.
I
don't remember exactly, but it was it was a long time. And so Moss Landing has a reputation of being the jazz freeform odyssey of the marine sciences, where you just kind of go in, you get accepted, and you meander your way through over X number of years because it's just the way it is. A lot of the faculty they used to have there, Moss Landing was not your easy master's thing. They when I started there, I don't know, it might have been similar when you did as well, Aaron, but it was they used to brag about how only 20% of the students that started actually finished their masters. Yeah, I know.
I mean, now literally only it'd be only 1 in 5 of you are going to actually finish. This is a master's.
I know.
That's and then they say something, but of those that finish, 60% of you will go on for PhDs. And of course, when you're your first week at school there, you're like, Jesus Christ, I just want to, if I can get a master's, the hell with the PhD. And so it was, Moss Landing was definitely a boot camp for crazy people that were sadomasochists, man, because it was not an easy program to get through. It was
not. And, the thing is it's PhD light. And so, I mean, I ended up with 4 or 5 publications for my master's, which is more than most PhDs.
I had 7.
Yeah, I know. And so the thing, I learned a tremendous amount at Moss Landing. I wouldn't sacrifice or turn. I would do it again if given the chance because I learned so much. And it was so important.
Well, so the flip side, when you got to do your PhD and you had to do things like qualifying exams and seminars, qualifying seminar. It was I was, you're probably like this. Like, I've already done this. What's the big deal?
It was honestly, that was the thing. Once you kind of went through that, when you get to a PhD, it was like, whatever, I can keep doing this forever. Fine, bring it on.
Yeah, it was pretty straightforward. So I guess that's the flip side, or one thing at Moss Landing, but it's definitely a school for people that want to have a sadomasochistic vent on things and stuff. Yep. So you went along. So you got your let me ask you. Here's a question. I don't even know this. I should know this, but when you were at Moss Landing, what point did you decide you're going to do a PhD, or did you already know you were going to do one?
Oh. Basically, once I was approaching graduation, realizing, holy cow, I don't know what I'm doing. I got to get a job or do something. I was like, what am I going to do? And I really I learned that I enjoyed research a lot. Mm-hmm. And that's one thing I learned and was beat into me, was like, hey, if you're going to go through this process, you really have to enjoy research and the process of science, which is a lot of frustration and dealing with setbacks. And it's all about perseverance and resilience and bouncing back when things go wrong, because things just basically always go wrong in science, right? They never go right the way you want
always.
To go. And so it was at that point when I was like, okay, what am I going to do? I'm like, well, I kind of want to do a PhD. But at that point, I was married. My wife had a great job in the area. And I was like, I'm not going to move my family around. What are the opportunities in the area? It was UC Santa Cruz, Stanford, a few places. So I cast my net around and tried to talk to people in the area who did PhD programs. And I ended up Greg actually introduced me to Barbara Block at Stanford. He knew her, and I was graduating. He ended up emailing her saying, hey, I have a shark guy. Are you looking for a shark guy? He was pretty good. And she said, yeah, I actually am. Her student, Kevin Wang, who's now at Virginia Institute of Marine Science, was just graduating. He ran was a big part of their white shark research project, salmon shark, stuff like that. He was heading out, and she was looking for someone to step in, and I was in the right place at the right time. And so much of this is that kind of that dynamic where you're just happen to be situated to be able to take advantage of an opportunity when it presents itself. And I was lucky enough to get in, because Stanford is not a place where you apply and the advisor wants you to get in. You have to apply to the school. You get evaluated amongst everyone, and you're not necessarily getting in even if your advisor wants you. And so I was lucky enough to get in with Barbara Block. And once I got in, I was set, and I was going and doing all kinds of crazy stuff with pelagic sharks and salmon sharks, white sharks, tunas, everything. It was an amazing opportunity. I learned a tremendous amount. But it was so much of that was just like is based on the realities of life and having a family, and how do you balance the need? Because oftentimes people, you got to go over here, you got to go different places for your PhD, postdoc, master's, whatever. And that never worked out for me, just for my family and my life. And so I ended up being in the Monterey Bay area in California for almost 20 years doing all this schooling, which is a great place to do marine science. So if you're going to end up and being stuck trying to figure out how to make your way in marine science, Monterey Bay area is a great place to be.
Yeah. So one of the things you did work on, that, because I get this all the time, is these. You worked on salmon sharks, these little salmon sharks, and if you live on the West Coast here, people, you see this on social media, but people would call up Moss Landing all the time, like, hey, there, a little white shark washed up on the beach, and you ask, like, well, how big is it? About 3 feet. Well, it's not a white shark; it's actually a salmon shark. Now, you worked on those to kind of uncover the mystery of why these things were beaching themselves. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, no. So that was, it was such a fun project. And it was just kind of trying to, because that was a consistent thing, like you said. There were these little lamnid sharks, these little just sausages of sharks. They're the cutest thing you could ever imagine. Little miniaturized, shrunken white sharks would be on the beach, and every now and then it would happen. We get calls, we go collect them. But the question has always been, why are these sharks stranding? And it's not like sharks strand all the time. They rarely do. And one of the unusual things about salmon sharks is they're regional endotherms, which means they generate and retain their own body heats. They actually warm their body above ambient water temperature. And so salmon sharks and porbeagles, the two species in the genus Lamna, are like the kings of endothermy. So they raise their body temperature by about 21 degrees C above ambient. So basically, if the water temperature is a little above zero, 10 degrees Fahrenheit, their body temperature is like 80 or 85 degrees Fahrenheit, right? So they are warm sharks in a cold ocean. And so that endothermy has some great benefits, but also potentially important limitations. And one of the issues is that salmon sharks, because they're endothermic, they generate a lot of their body heat with their red muscle. So red muscle and white muscle are the two kinds of muscle. Most of fish muscle mass is white muscle. It's white because there's not much blood flow, not much vascularization, mitochondria, myoglobin, all this other stuff. The red muscle is the marathon runner. So it's, think about a bird. It's like the leg muscles versus the breast. So the legs are what they're always using, the red dark meat, versus the white meat is the white muscle. And so the dark meat is for constant movement, constantly doing things. And so the salmon sharks and other endothermic sharks, which are just in the family Lamidae for the most part, they have these big masses of red muscle that are located right next to their backbone in the middle of their body. And they generate a lot of heat. And they have these countercurrent heat exchangers that trap the heat in the middle of the body. They also have countercurrent heat exchangers in their head, in their guts, in their stomach, kidneys, spleen, things like that trap the heat, the metabolic heat, because the end product of all biological processes is heat generation and heat loss. And so they trap that and they elevate their body temperature, and that lets them swim faster because their brain's warmer, they can think faster, they can see faster actually, they digest meals faster, they can grow faster, everything is sped up. But so one of the limitations of that is that when you're small, if your body temperature drops, your red muscle stops working. So there were some great papers that came out that showed that when the red muscle of salmon sharks gets below about 20 degrees centigrade, 18 to 20 degrees, it stops working. It just doesn't work anymore. It doesn't generate power, doesn't do anything. And so if their body temperature drops too far, they're gonna get stressed out and die. And so what our theory was, and not just mine, but lots of people, and I was just the one that kind of tested it, but was that maybe this is associated with cold shock. And if you think about the coast of California, we have a very intense upwelling season where there's these huge masses of very cold, deep water that gets sucked up to the surface very quickly. And it can drop the water temperature by 7 to 10 degrees centigrade or something like that. And so almost instantaneously. So if you're a little tiny warm shark that's a meter long, so 3 feet long or so, and you all of a sudden get stuck in this bolus of this huge mass of very cold water, your red muscle is not going to work. You're going to get super stressed out. And so the one thing that they found is that when they started looking at these sharks, because they behaved really weird when they're stranding, so people would see them floundering in the surf and eventually end up on the beach. And so they acted weird. And they looked and they found that they had these massive brain infections. They had meningoencephalitis. It was this very particular kind of bacteria. And the bacteria is associated in aquaculture, salmon aquaculture, things like that, with stress. So whenever the salmon are handled, they get these outbreaks of this bacterial infection. And so basically the idea was maybe these animals get stressed because of cold shock, and it basically infects their brain, gives them this massive brain systemic infection. And every salmon shark that's been looked at, for the most part, I think actually everyone that's been looked at, baby salmon shark, has had this infection. And so when you actually start to look at when they strand, like, so if I find that the sharks stranded in Monterey Bay, and I look at, okay, what was going on in Monterey Bay for the last 2 weeks? Because these infections happen and resolve themselves very quickly. So once they get that infection, they die pretty quickly within a week or two. So we basically started looking at where every stranding event, let's look back in the history within a certain area around that stranding area. And every time that we looked back, it was very cold. There was a severe upwelling event. And so our theory is that they get stuck in this cold water because of their warm physiology. It stresses them out, triggers this massive brain infection. They end up stranding. And they've ended up seeing the same infection in common threshers, which are another endothermic shark. and even potentially juvenile leopard, white sharks. Maybe I think maybe there might have been a white shark they found. I don't remember. I haven't been keeping up with the literature so much, but it was a cool because it was like a detective story, and you actually find records. The very first salmon shark that was actually described was described in Central California by David Starr Jordan, who was the first president of Stanford and a famous ichthyologist in America, one of the most famous American ichthyologists. Also a little bit racist, it turns out, but bygones, I guess. Yeah. But the salmon shark was described, and that salmon shark he first collected is at Calicut, I think. And it was stranded. It was a little baby salmon shark that stranded back in 1880. And so these stranding events go way back. And so there's been some insinuations that this is contaminants and pollution and whatever. And no, the fact is they've been stranding as long as we've been around, probably.
Wow.
So, yeah. Anyway, that's a long-winded answer. Yeah.
Do you see similar things with porbeagle sharks, which are a close relative of the salmon sharks?
Not in the Atlantic, but it's like in the around here. There's not really a whole lot of upwelling in the same way that you get in California, and in the eastern boundary currents in Europe. I don't know if there's baby porbeagles around there.
So here's something that hasn't been studied, but I just know this from having lived there. In South Africa, they get these cold snaps. We get the warm water coming from the Agulhas down towards the Western Cape, and it meets with the Benguela Current right there at Cape Point. But at times of the year, the first few records of crocodile sharks, Pseudocarcharias kamahari, which is a little lamnid. It only gets like 2 feet long. Go check it out. It's called crocodile sharks. The first records of these things from South Africa were beach wash around Cape Town, and this is
Has anyone ever looked in them, like in terms of like red mussel distribution? And
this was back in the late '80s, early '90s when I was a student there, and it wasn't even. It was just like, it was just washed up. And there's a few other sharks would wash up. You'd see occasionally a bull shark or a couple others, but these little crocodile sharks, which the guys would occasionally catch offshore in the tuna fisheries because they're a pelagic species, they would wash up on the beaches like around Cape Town. And I don't know, I probably picked up 2, 3, 4 of them that I came across.
Wow.
But they fit exactly what you're talking about with a lot of red muscle mass. These are very high-speed little sharks. And again, if you're listening, go check out a crocodile shark.
They're cool.
Very cool, very cool shark. But we used to get these cold snaps, and you would see, again, this is all anecdotal stuff, but you would see these. Occasionally, I'd come across these little, and people would come. I wasn't the only person. Other people would see them occasionally. Not big numbers, but you'd find one here, one there on the beaches.
Yeah, that's the crocodile shark is on my bucket list. I've never seen one. I've been fascinated with them for years. Ever since I read about them, I would love.
Wow, I'm looking at one right now. That looks cool.
Crocodile.
Dude, I can tell you where you could see like literally hundreds of them. If you want,
well, you tell me, and we can do it offline because I want to see. I want to see a crocodile shark.
oh my God! You can. Yeah, I saw more crocodile. I've seen them, but I got a place. We'll talk later. We'll talk after the show.
All right, cool. Let's do it.
We can see a lot of crocodile sharks.
Count me in. I need to see a crocodile shark. Absolutely.
They're an awesome little. They're definitely one I've always would have been interested to do like an ecology study on, but I could never get enough of them.
It's such a low-hanging fruit. I mean, that to me is like that's one of the few lamniform, like one of that group of sharks that's left that's really no one knows much about.
No, they do catch them in tuna fisheries. These pelagic fisheries, they catch those out there. Some places they'll catch them in. I think out in the Hawaiian Islands they'll catch. This is not the place I'm talking about, but they'll catch them out in the Hawaiian Islands, but they just throw them back because they're a small little shark. They're not worth anything. The fins are small. They just throw them back. But I think a lot of the pelagic fisheries probably catch them more frequently than people realize.
Yeah.
And just if you're curious, after you look at a pitch, if people listening to the show, if you look at them, they're vicious little eaters too. They'll eat cephalopods. They'll eat other bony fishes, small sharks. I mean, they're pretty vicious little critters. So anyway,
Just to let people know, if you look up crocodile sharks and you look for images, there's a lot of AI of crocodile sharks that are not accurate. So make sure you're looking up the right ones. Because there's a lot where you're like, is that it? No.
They don't look like crocodiles.
They don't look like crocodiles, yeah.
And I'll say that just for if you're interested, the scientific name is Pseudocarcharias kamahari. So I know it's a mouthful to say, but just look for something like that, pseudo blah blah blah. You can figure it out from there.
We'll put the picture, maybe if we can fit it in. We'll put the picture in there so people can see what they look like, because they look cool, very torpedo shaped.
Has anyone ever filmed a crocodile shark
in situ?
Yeah,
not that I'm aware of. No. Actually,
I've never seen any. I've never seen any pictures of him swimming. It's always on the deck.
What are the depths? Like what depths they sit at?
Oh, here.
I have no idea.
They're kind of pelagic. They're anywhere from the surface to a few hundred meters. Actually, here's a plug for my YouTube, Searching for Lost Sharks. If you go to episode 2, Searching for Lost Sharks, Extinct or Alive, on my YouTube channel at Lost Shark Guy, I found some crocodile sharks at the fish market in Ecuador. Mm. So you see a good picture of holding one right in that thing. So
get some samples next time.
Yeah, exactly. but more importantly, you need to subscribe to the channel, YouTube channel.
I'll subscribe if I get samples.
Okay, we can work that out. That's not a problem.
All right,
cool. Well, that's kind of a nice little sign. Anybody listening out there, any students that wants to look for a project, there you go. Crocodile sharks and cold water snaps.
Endothermia is so cool, honestly.
Yeah.
I can talk forever about endothermia. It's fascinating.
Yeah, cool. So we've covered that was one. The other thing I really wanted to talk to you about, and what really prompted me to get a hold of you to come on the show, is sharks and hurricanes. Has been on the social media, and of course I'm thinking Sharknado, so I have to, and your manager is also your wife. Happen to be been promoting that.
I know
very heavily on social media.
I hate social media, so I just have no social media presence, and so my wife Marion does a wonderful job advertising for me, and I appreciate it because I will never do that.
So can you tell us about the sharks and the hurricanes and how it's related to Sharknado?
So it's kind of funny because we've been working on this project for 5 years or so, and the idea has been going even further back. Not so much hurricanes, but the animals as ocean sensors has been, people have been doing it for a long time. And elephant seals have been, for decades at this point, been carrying these tags on their head, these big tags made by Sea Mammal Research Unit, SMURU, and St Andrews University, Scotland. And they're the only company that makes these kind of tags that collect oceanographic quality data. And the idea is the elephant seals would swim, come up to the surface, and when they would take these profiles of the ocean, going down and then back up, the temperature, the salinity, the depth, and then they would send back to the satellites, whenever they surface, these profiles. And they're using that, it's just like a research vessel to go out. You can either spend tens of thousands of dollars a day to send a research vessel out to drop CTD profiles, conductivity, temperature, depth profiles. It's the basic sensor kind of unit that we use in oceanography down through the water column to figure out what's going on physically, and so, especially like in terms of the mixed layer depth, where the thermocline, everything is above the thermocline, where it's isothermal, everything is well mixed up in the surface of the water, and that's where all the action happens in the ocean for the most part, at least on the scale we live on. And so the idea is that you can turn animals into these ocean observing platforms that basically go do the work for you. You can put different kinds of technology on them that basically record, here's what's going on in the ocean where these animals have been, and send it back in real time, where the actual oceanographers, atmospheric scientists can access these data, because as you know, basically all atmospheric processes, weather is really kind of driven fundamentally by the ocean. And so we have to know what's happening in the ocean, but we have to know what's going on below the surface. And so satellite oceanography is wonderful, but it just sees the skin. We have to get something out there to look down deep. And so you either have to send a boat, or we can send gliders, for example, these robotic platforms that go out and do things, go down and come up and record the same kind of data. Or there are these Argo buoys, which are these basically like gliders, but they just go from the surface down to the bottom, out in the middle of the ocean, and they report back what's going on. And so the issue is that we need more data, in particular where I'm at in the Mid-Atlantic Bight. The Mid-Atlantic Bight from Cape Hatteras up to like Cape Cod, actually has the biggest sea surface temperature change annually anywhere on the planet. So from the summer in Delaware Bay, for example, it goes from basically being 90, like a hot tub, 90 degrees Fahrenheit, and it freezes sometimes in the winter. And so we get everything from tropical species in the late summer and fall to polar species in the winter. It's coming from California, where I spent 20 years as a graduate student, postdoc, everything. It's always basically the same. It varies by a few degrees. Here, it varies by like 30 degrees Fahrenheit or centigrade, right? So it goes from almost 100 degrees Fahrenheit to almost freezing. So it's an incredible turnover. And so this has huge implications for hurricanes. And so hurricanes are driven by ocean heat content, which if you think of like taking a tube of water from the surface to the bottom and you measure the heat in that tube, that's the ocean heat content. But most of that heat is in the surface, that mixed layer I'm talking about above the thermocline. So that's what really a hot surface mixed layer is what drives stronger hurricanes. And so you need to have a kind of a map of the ocean heat content to overlay and to use in your models, because the hurricanes will follow that ocean heat content, be stronger or go in different directions depending on where the heat is. And so right now we're limited in a lot of these data because it's expensive to get boats out there. Sending a research vessel out costs tens of thousands at least a day for the most part. Gliders, those robotic profilers things, they cost a lot of money. So for the Slocum gliders that people use, they cost $500,000 to about $1 million a pop. Sending them out, they go out and they kind of mow the lawn back and forth for about several weeks to a month tops. And those, every time you deploy them, is just maybe $30,000 to $50,000, $60,000. And they end up throwing away most of their data because they're so slow that most of the data they get is related to all the other data they already got. So they don't get a lot of new information from our profile because they're so correlated in time and space. And so the idea is that we can actually we're helping Smuru, that tag company. They've built this smaller miniaturized version of the tag they put on the elephant seals' heads. They've miniaturized it to the point where we can put it on shark fins a little bit easier. And so in the mid-Atlantic bight, we don't have a whole lot of marine mammals, air breathers, so that live in the ocean. Sea turtles, they're there, but they're not as many as you might get in other parts, especially as you get to higher latitudes. And beyond that, they're all threatened, endangered. And so to touch them, you have to go through huge permitting kind of hurdles and everything like that, which makes it a little bit more challenging. And so sharks are everywhere, and they're basically much more accessible, available than marine mammals and reptiles. And so we've been trying to work to push the development of these smaller tags so that ocean observatories that are around the planet that collect the data that we use to understand climate and hurricanes and extreme weather events, that they can use these small tags in the future around the world. And so the idea is that in the mid-Atlantic bight, at least, we will have a fleet of tagged sharks swimming around, diving, the sharks are doing their normal sharky thing, moving up and down through the water column. And as they're moving up and down through the water column, they're collecting data. And every time they come to the surface and their fin breaks the surface, they transmit, here's what's going on where I am right now. And that comes in real time. There's a pipeline from the shark to the satellite to us. And then we ship that out to the global telecommunications system and the integrated oceanographic observing system, IUS system, which then use these to build these models to understand hurricanes and everything else. There's a lot of end users for these data, but our particular, again, focus in the mid-Atlantic bight is hurricanes because it's a big issue for obviously the south, the East Coast and the southeastern U.S.
Wow.
I'll tell you, you do end up saving a lot of money on winches and wire from not having to send down the CTD. As someone who's done that in the Gulf of Mexico for quite some time, that's a big pain in the butt. So it's nice to be able to save money and time on that, because when those break, that's a lot of fixing.
How do you think it'll work with the sharks, Aaron? Because the sharks don't necessarily have to come to the surface.
Well, Dave, that's a Tough question. That's the thing is like when you look at the diving behaviors of mammals and reptiles, it's wonderful. Air breathers, because they have to come to the surface.
Yeah.
Sharks don't. But there are some sharks that come to the surface more often than others. Mm-hmm. And the best part is when they do come to the surface, where they surface is usually far away from where they did before. So each surfacing event provides very useful critical information that ends up being very valuable. So if they came to the surface every few hours, you would end up throwing away most of those data because they don't give you new information. And so it's kind of, it's a complement. It's not going to ever replace the Argo buoys or the gliders or the shipborne, sensors. It's basically like for $50,000, you can put out 20 of these tags or something like that, and they last for months. And they will swim around doing their thing, and you'll get intermittent surfacing events all over the place. And the idea is that'll fill in all the gaps that we don't have other observations.
How long, when they surface, how long do they have to be at the surface to download?
10 seconds, basically.
Oh, really quick then.
Oh, that's fast.
Yeah, I mean, seconds, maybe be a few seconds for the most part. This is kind of ends up being very complicated because it has to do with satellite coverage. When does the shark surface relative to where the satellites are when it surfaces? Mm-hmm. You have to have very precise locations. And so the tags we're using have fast lock GPS, in addition to these Argos transmitters, which is kind of like these fancy things where basically the GPS gives you a location within 50 meters or so. Mm-hmm. And that tells you exactly where this profile was from, knock on wood. But right now because of COVID, we got this grant right when COVID hit. COVID basically slammed everything. Everything shut down. And it was only last year we put out the first few tags. And none of it worked very well. But that's because we figured out it was attachment to the tags. The tags have to be positioned up high. We figured that out, and then we put out a few more this year. They were transmitting like champions. We got a couple profiles, and then they went quiet, and we don't know why. We think we figured it out, but what's frustrating was that we put these tags out in May. Late May of this year, 2025, off of basically 50 miles off of Ocean City, Maryland. And the sharks were just kicking up and down the mid-continental shelf, swimming around, doing a great job. And then they went quiet. And then on the 4th of July weekend, one of our tagged sharks was caught off of Nantucket, Massachusetts. And we got a few pictures sent to us by Jeff Kneebone, Toby Curtis, and these other, shark scientists. Again, it's a small community. They said, "Hey, whose tag is this?" I'm like, "It's me. It's us." We never heard from the tag, and so it was out of the water, and so that told us that it wasn't doing what it should do.
Right.
But they let it go, which is good. And that tag actually just a few days ago, started talking again. And so
So it's working.
Yeah, so we're figuring it out, right? And so we're in the kind of very steep part of the learning curve, and we're actually heading out next week on a vessel called the RV Robert Gray, which we got through Seakeep. We got access through it's through Seakeepers, which is a great group that connects yachts up to researchers and things like that. Yeah. It's a new boat, and so we're going to go out for a few days. Going to go out to the outer shelf. Have some fun, try to see how many tags we can get out. We have 5 to 7, 8 tags to put out.
What kind of sharks you putting them on?
Well, it depends, right? So we recently published a paper, which I can send you if you're interested in.
Absolutely.
But it was all about considerations for using sharks as ocean observing platforms. As my grad student Caroline Wernicke, who's doing this, she calls them SOOPs. Sharks as ocean observing platforms. Mm-hmm. And as SOOPs. And so basically that whole process was using existing tag data from many, many different research groups to look at how would we predict or how can we judge whether one species or another is going to be better for carrying these tags. And so it has to do with the vertical movements, how much time they're at the surface from different transmissions and Argos transmissions, things like that. And it's early days, but sharks are hard. Whenever you talk to people who work in, again, air breathers, they're like, sharks are mad. How do you work on these things? They just do what they want. They don't do anything in a consistent way. And that's very true. That's part of the fun. It's part of the fun of it. But it's also a challenge. And so we are right now chewing on that challenge and trying to get our way through the gristle of that challenge, so to speak.
So why shark? So again, why sharks and not marine mammals?
Because we don't have a lot of them in our area. Gray seals will show up briefly in the winter, and other than that, there's none. There are sea turtles, but how do you catch sea turtles easily? And permitting, it's a nightmare.
Yeah.
Whereas sharks, for the most part, for better or for ill, are a lot easier to get. Permitting requirements are a lot lower.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Interesting. I thought it'd be harder.
It'd be interesting. You probably don't see basking sharks that much in your area.
Not in our area, but up north a little bit, Massachusetts.
Yeah, that seems like be a good one because I'm thinking more like you're probably like dealing with duskies, sandbars.
Yeah, none of them come to the surface. We're hoping. I mean, we caught our very first day out. We went out 40, 50 miles, as I mentioned. We started putting chum in the water. The first shark to show up was a juvenile white shark.
Oh, really?
I was not expecting that. We caught one. We pulled it up, and I was like, "Well, that's unexpected." And the next day, we saw another one.
Another juvenile white shark?
Yeah,
like a different one.
Yeah, a different one. Several of them. And the one shark, we tagged it with a spot tag, which is a tag that transmits when the fin's at the surface. It's like what OSearch uses. And we also put a mini pat, which is a pop-off tag that records the vertical behavior. Wow. And the shark has been doing a bang-up job transmitting. It's been going up to Cape Cod and back to New Jersey and back along kind of the Gulf of the Mid-Atlantic Bight, basically all over the place. So the reason we did that was to figure out maybe juvenile white sharks would be good for carrying these tags, because actually counterintuitively, the neritic environment, so the environment on the shelf, is actually, we have less data for those areas than the open ocean in many examples because of those Argo buoys that I was talking about earlier.
Wow. That's amazing. If you went out there to try to catch a white shark,
it would never happen.
Never happen.
It will never happen again.
Did you talk to Greg Scommel up in New England or anybody about that?
No, not yet. I mean, it's mainly because we weren't expecting any of that, right?
No,
and they see the big ones. So I mean, Toby Curtis, the people that have been working on the juvenile white sharks and those groups, we've been talking with them, and we've been working with them. We've been trying to figure out. They're collaborators on the Sharks as Ocean Sensors. He and Toby Curtis and the group he's associated with at the SOFO, the South Fork Natural History Museum in Long Island. Mm-hmm. And so once we get to the point of where we get the technology and the approach developed to the point where we can start to operationalize it, we want to give them tags to put out. We want to give tags to any group that wants them. And so there's actually a lot of interest in the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean because they don't have money to put out gliders. Mm-hmm. Right, or big research vessels. So it's they can afford $20,000 or $30,000 in tags that will last for a while when the animals come around, but they can't necessarily afford a $500,000 or $1 million glider.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, except if they want the little white sharks, I know a bay here in Monterey where we get plenty of them.
I'd be stepping on everyone's toes by going.
Oh my God!
If I even look at those juvenile white sharks, I'll be offending half the population. Probably.
It's been a big. I can. Well, obviously, I understand that whole situation here. It's like one of those. That's another reason why I look at lost sharks, because nobody cares about those. You get into white sharks, people lose their freaking minds here, especially in Monterey Bay. They lose their freaking
everyone's
mind.
I don't know that I will ever be very involved in white sharks just because it's the politics and the personalities is just too much.
Yeah, no, it is. It's a whole. We'll have you on. Well, next we'll have you on the show again sometime when you and I can just bitch about white shark politics.
And I don't even know the half of it. I mean, because I've kind of have skirted the white shark world. I kind of just flirt with it. I kind of bounce around on the periphery.
Right.
And so I don't quite ever get fully involved and invested in any of it. It's ended up working out for me.
Best you don't,
You just catch juveniles off the Atlantic coast.
Yeah, it's just, it's amazing. It's amazing. So Aaron, it's been really great having you on the show here. And definitely got to have you come back and talk about little white shark politics and stuff. But wanted to ask you, What advice would you have for a young person who's considering, maybe pursuing a PhD or going into marine science? Do you have any advice for them?
Oh, I have so much advice.
Run like hell.
So it's a wonderful. I am the happiest person probably in the world. I could never imagine being happier, and I feel so lucky to have landed in the position I have. I'm just so lucky, and so much of that is because of the support of people who have let me get here. And that's, you, Dave, and Greg Caillet, and Barbara Block, and Robert Lee, Bob Lee, and all these people that have been so help you, right? And so you realize that it takes a village to make a shark scientist, right? And so I'm only here because of the people that invested in me and trusted me. And so find those people that give you good advice and listen to them, and realize there's no way from point A to point B. It's never a linear path, and we all follow our own paths. If you want to do it, stick with it, and you'll make it work. And just be open, say yes to opportunities, and don't start out looking to do shark science. Look to do good science. Learn skills, learn questions. What are the questions? What are the theories you're interested? What makes you excited when you read a research paper or whatever? Just do what you do and do the best job you can. And if you keep doing that, things will end up working out. But it might not be in the path you think. And so be open to different paths, and you never know where you're going to end up. So if that's the goal, you will get there if you stick with it. That's
awesome.
What I think.
And last question, quick. Where do you see your career in the next 10, 20 years?
I don't know. Tomorrow I can't even get through. I mean, I'm trying to get my Google Calendar is filled up. I mean, I never thought that it'd be the point where I'm overwhelmed, but it's it's just meetings all the time, meeting. But it's all great and wonderful first world problems, as they say. But I'm hopefully going to be right where I am, keeping doing what I'm doing. I'm really happy being where I am at University of Delaware. I feel really lucky to have landed in this school with this group of people. It's a very supportive group. And it's a great place to do the work I do. My office looks out on the ocean, and there's the dock and the sharks. I can actually catch sharks off the dock. So It's just, I don't have to go anywhere. And so my goal from the beginning has been, from when I was at Moss Landing, I would just like to be able to do anything related to my field. And then if I can do it in my backyard, that's even better. It's like traveling is super fun. I love it. But it's also, as you get older and have family, you kind of are like, that's kind of hard going across the world. I mean, but I did that when I was younger, and I loved it, and I will continue doing it when I can. But it's like just being able to do what I need to do where I'm at is really satisfying. And
I bet
it's like the freedom you have being a scientist. You get to ask the questions you want to ask.
For sure.
It's all about creativity. And actually, it was Mark Meekin who told me this. And it was when I found out I got this University of Delaware job, he was at Hopkins Marine Station at Stanford University giving a talk, and he was out with my advisor and other cohorts, and I was out with my wife celebrating. And I got the job, and I ran to him. He's like, and I was talking to him, and he was like, the only limitation is your imagination and being able to figure out how to make it work. And it's up to you to make it work.
Yeah.
And I still kind of am thinking about that. I'm like, there's no right or wrong way to do it. I just have to figure out how to make it work. And so you go out and you hustle, and if you want to do it, you make it happen.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, that's great. Great advice, Aaron. Great. So thank you so much for coming on, and we'll have you back. Definitely have you back in sometime and tell us more about how your sharks and hurricanes are going, and maybe they'll make a movie Sharknado 8 or 9 out of it. So knock on wood. I can only hope so. Anyway, thanks.
Thank you so much.
Of course, it's a pleasure. Anytime.
Thank you, Aaron, for joining us on today's episode of the Beyond Jaws podcast. Dave, it was a fantastic interview. You got to hear about sharks and hurricanes. What'd you think?
Oh, I loved it. It was great. It was nice. It was, well, of course, it's always nice having somebody on that was a former student at
Yeah.
Moss Landing. We have a lot of shared
The
interests
alumni.
there. The alumni. We both had this. Greg Kaye was our advisor. Me back in the '80s and Aaron in the early 2000s. No, it was great. It was really good having him on, catching up, hearing about the different research he's doing. I think it was really interesting. He talked a bit about the salmon sharks, which is something that we've had come up, I think, a couple times on some of the other podcasts. But I deal with here in Moss Landing all the time. Where I get this time of year, I get phone calls or people wanting to know about this little white shark that washed up in the beach. It's a salmon shark. I thought Aaron gave a very compelling explanation on what the whole issue is with the warming of the blood and the white mussel and the red mussel. Just for that alone, it's worth listening, re-listening to today's episode on that. And then, of course, this kind of innovative technology that they're looking at with the sharks and the hurricanes and the and everything, I think is really it's just to me, being around as long as I have, is that it just shows how advanced the technology is. That the fact that it can try to put sensors on sharks so they can like figure out what the weather's doing to determine.
That's amazing.
A hurricane. It's amazing. That's the kind of cool stuff that's really, really, really neat to see. And hear more about. So hopefully I'll have Aaron on, maybe one of his students later on, talk a little bit about some of the advances they're making in some of these areas.
Yeah, and they were talking, we won't talk about it right now, but some of the future episodes that we might be able to do with some of the people in Aaron's lab, they're looking on like cutting edge, innovative research, which I'm looking forward to diving into if we have the chance. As it's a little early now for that to talk about it, but once we're able to, I think once they start getting some results and some conclusions, maybe a paper published, we'll be able to talk about it.
Yeah.
I think it's wonderful to see a monitoring program used with sharks. I think that's pretty cool. And some of the challenges they're facing with that, sharks don't come to the surface as often as mammals or a sea turtle. And so some of those, but also some of the data that they're getting back, and they're actually getting pretty compelling data that could help measure, how hurricanes are going to be moving through the system. I think it's going to be really interesting.
Yeah. Fascinating stuff. So really, definitely this was an episode to listen to, and you may want to listen to it again because we got a lot of good advice in here. And Aaron talked about his sort of path and his journey to get there to where he is today. And definitely check it out. And you may want to listen to it again. I think we had some good, like we said at the outset of the show, we had some really good advice here if you're thinking of doing a PhD, to really consider if it's something you really should do. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. Ask yourself, well, if it's going to help your career. I think it's really interesting because I think also too, it's like a lot of people do have PhDs now, and there's an argument to be said to get them because you're going to compete with all the other PhDs. Whereas like someone like myself who applies for a job, if I apply for it and I go up against other PhDs, you may not have that chance. So it's a bit of a catch-22 in a way, because you have so many more people coming out with PhDs than there were previously, that the master's almost seems like it's a prerequisite, to get that. So I think it's a really interesting conundrum.
Yeah, I think what Aaron said is pretty accurate. Like, you can't go wrong with the master's. You'll learn skills, which is what most employers are going to want to know, skills. But if you're doing the PhD, you really need to think why you need it. If you're going to go in an academic route like Aaron did, if you're going to be a university professor, you need a PhD. That's no doubt about it. There's a few other positions, but most jobs you don't need a PhD. And if you're just looking for the title, there's a lot easier ways you can get a PhD than doing one in marine science, which is you're looking at probably easily a 5 to more like a 7-year commitment, a lot of work, and you got to publish, and it's a lot. And then the chances of getting a job in the other end can be pretty iffy. So but a master's, you can't go wrong. You can pretty much get hired by a master if you got a master's degree. So anyway, I think it's a good episode. Young person, you're deciding what to do, think about it. Something Aaron talked a little bit about, I think we're off air after the show, is about how taking time off between each step in your degree. And you experienced this, Andrew.
I did that. It helped me focus, Dave. Like it really did. It helped me understand like which way I wanted to go. And find the opportunities and help me understand, what I was doing, because like you come out of your undergraduate You know, you've accumulated so much information, and you haven't really had. I didn't have a time to really think about where I want to go, what field I want to go, and I didn't really know. And there's so many different ways you can branch off, and so it's difficult to choose. So I always recommend to people what I did is I just worked. You know, get the first job you can get. If it's something interesting, great. If not, you know, try and find something else. But work into something and be like, is this the path I want to follow? Is this where I want to go further and further? And if it's not, then you go to a master's and figure out something else, or you go to another job and you figure out I think the problem is that people think that everybody has to be in a rush. There's no rush. You know, if you get your master's in your 20s, that's great. If you get in your 30s, that's great. If you get in your 40s, no problem. Like you can still get it. It's just a matter. I'd rather get a master's where I know what I want rather than just doing it for the sake of doing it.
I was gonna say, I think too, people, you know, nowadays it's more common today than certainly when I was going through it. People take like a gap year or two, or certainly after, either between high school and college, or between their college and their masters. And I can speak as so. I mean, when I was coming through, it was pretty standard. You go straight from your bachelor's to a master's. That was pretty common back then. But nowadays, I notice when I have students that come in with having taken a year or two off after their bachelor's, they're much more focused and serious about what they're going to do than students that go straight through. And I kind of look at my own thing like, if I'd have had a little time off, I might have been a little more focused, but it's just different times. But I think sometimes taking that year or two off between each step from a bachelor's to a master's, and then if you're thinking PhD, I'd take time off and think seriously if that's what you want to do, because it's a big investment. If nothing else, time. You got time. Time that you got. It's going to take you years to get through. You'll be into most people, you'll be well into your 30s, early to mid 30s. And when other, people that haven't gone that have already started off in their whole life path with careers, jobs, marriage, family. So something to think about. And I think we covered that. Yeah.
And the other benefit, like the last benefit I would say of when you get to choose is you've actually worked in a team before if you've had another job. So when you come back and you're working in a lab, oftentimes you're working in a team. You're working with other lab mates, other master's students, PhD students, postdocs, whoever's in that lab. And so you're a little bit more, you understand a little bit more about what that work is going to look like.
Right.
And because when you do your graduate work, you almost have to treat it like a bit like a job, a bit more like a job than a student. You're expected to contribute to the lab, not only with your own research, but maybe with other parts of the research as well. And so to be able to be adaptable, to be able to work in team, go out in the field and have that experience will be a lot more beneficial to you when you come back, and be more beneficial to the head of the lab, the chief scientist, right? Yep. So I think that's really important. But anyway, it's obviously definitely a great discussions coming out of this. We'd love to hear from you, like what your discussion would be and what questions or comments you have on this episode, about doing a PhD, doing a master's or other things, or sharks and hurricanes, whatever that might be. Dave, if people want to get a hold of you, how would they do so?
There's Lost Shark Guy on Instagram, a YouTube channel, Lost Shark Guy. Check out the series, Searching for Lost Sharks, Extinct or Alive.
So good.
New episode should be out by now. And those are the best ways to follow me and connect with me.
Awesome. And of course, you can always connect with us on our YouTube channel, Beyond Jaws Pod, as well as our Instagram, Beyond Jaws Pod. It's always great to do another episode with you, Dave. And thank you very much to Aaron for joining us. And thank you guys for listening each and every week or every couple of weeks when we publish these. We really appreciate this. And we love hearing from you and your feedback. So thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of the Beyond Jaws podcast. From Dave and I, we really appreciate it. Have a great day. We'll talk to you next time, and happy conservation.